Greetings, loves. How are you? It's been a minute or so since I've dropped in with you. I have been busy um, working with my co-facilitator inside of Skydancer and preparing this epic underworld journey for you. And so pretty soon we are going to open the doors to that. We are going to have like an introductory call so that you can come in and feel the frequency that we're seeding inside of Underworld and how epic this journey is going to be. Underworld work is always extremely deep. It is extremely alchemizing. It is always in service to reorienting our true north, right? And making sure that we are able to feel into things like our greater purpose in life, what we're really doing here, to touch into and bring forward the essence self. Our capacity to be seen grows. We tend to, the shields over our hearts tend to break open. I mean, like all of this beautiful um, stuff happens inside the underworld where we really do come face to face with ourselves and meet ourselves in a whole new way. Um, and so that journey is highly transformational, and having Venus's support in doing that work is the thing that is so epic. We are so supported by her. Every time an underworld happens, I just have the most epic changes. And at this point, as I was relating in one of our modules of Skydancer, I feel like my life often just fits like a glove. And that is not something I've ever been able to say before, except for these past few years. So Venus work is very powerful. It's very transformational. And that is what I've been up to. But I wanted to drop in today because we've had a lot of astrology. I think the last time we talked was before the eclipse. One of the transits that I mentioned during the eclipse was the Jupiter Uranus transit. The Jupiter Uranus transit is happening today in the sign of Taurus. And this is in a really big transit. It's really important. It's on every astrologer's 2024 list of big deals, right? When we have planets that come together, it's kind of like a new moon for them. They're starting a new cycle. And so Jupiter and Uranus meet every 14 years in a new sign. And so the seed point of their cycle is important. Beginning with Jupiter, what is Jupiter? Jupiter is what we call the greater benefic. So he is a planet of blessings. In the Vedic pantheon, they call him Guru, right? He is related to spirituality, to big sweeping thoughts and ideas. As the ruler of Sagittarius, he's very philosophical. He wants to answer and know the big questions. He's on a search for truth about life. He's very uplifting. He really speaks to us also of this kind of what I like to call the path of perfection, because Jupiter likes to have experiences for the sake of experience. There's almost like a hedonistic quality to him where, he will travel, he'll take part in different cultures, he will try new and different foods, he's involved in higher learning, and all just for the sake and the joy of it. It's kind of like that Joseph Campbell's saying, follow your bliss, where when we do things for the sake of the ecstasy of doing the thing, like that's it, like not to meet some end, not to make some money out of it, not to get a certificate, not because it adds to our continuing education, not because we're going to take great photos in a place so that we can sell a program down the road, but just for the sake of having the experience. I call Jupiter the path of perfection, because so often it is when we go off the narrow road, which is what I happen to think of as Saturn. Saturn is the ruler of the narrow road, who just neatly keeps us on our fated path with deep duty and devotion and doesn't ever let us get off. And so we don't tend to have a lot of experiences. Saturn is like the ascetics path, the spiritual ascetics path, the monks and stuff. And Jupiter is like, look, let's take the scenic route. And sometimes when we take the scenic route in life, that's where we end up a little bumped and bruised. And so one of the visuals that I often use for Jupiter is it's the path of life that takes us down the rock tumbler, right? So we have the sexy romance, or we have the um, the unexpected experience because we took the detour, the scenic route. And that's kind of like a rock going in the rock tumbler of life, right? And you get gridded up and you're tumbling around with other rocks, and it doesn't always feel that great, but you still come out polished, right? Your soul gets kind of a polishing through having that experience. And so we all always have these choices. Like, do we always stay on the narrow path, working towards our fate and our soul purpose and developing our soul contracts and just being about the business of our soul curriculum? Or do we also um, have some deeply human experiences just for the sake of it, just for the sake of having fun? And so, in this way, Jupiter is such an elevating um, planet, and he's also related to this idea of havingness. Like, how much can we have? How much abundance can we have? If my teacher, Ren Butler, he went through and he renamed all of the masculine planets different goddess names, right? Just so that we have an idea of like who is Jupiter, Zeus, with his big libido and his desire to have lots of love affairs, um, and lots of power and lots of experiences. Who is he in feminine form? And Ren put Lakshmi as like the feminine form of Jupiter. And so, we all know who Lakshmi is. She's very sensual. She's very abundant. She is kind of a connoisseur of her life. She's just got this really like dripping with having this capacity to have a lot. Whatever Jupiter touches, he expands. There's a sense of expansion inside of Jupiter. And so if Jupiter is next to another planet, it tends to magnify, of course, Jupiter's energy, but also the planet he's next to. In this case, it's Uranus. And any kind of like Jupiter work that we're asked to do in our lives, like when we have a Jupiter return, like where Jupiter returns to the place it was when we were born, it's always a moment when we can get in touch with our own levels of havingness. If you're one of my students, this, so sorry if it's redundant, but I've often talked about the fact that I was raised by parents who were raised by parents. So my grandparents lived through the Great Depression, and both of them lived on farms. My grandparents did. And so they became very frugal. They were very good at making ends meet on not a lot. And that has those themes have come down my ancestral line. And so I can find myself, like I was saying to a girlfriend the other day, I've got a 11-year-old computer, I think, and it's got all these plugins just to make it keep ticking. I drove my previous car for 19 years just because she kept going. She kept working. I took care of her so she'd last, right? Um, and there is something to look at too about like why sometimes when I can afford it or when I can do it, when it is, it is absolutely fine to do it, why my channels of havingness aren't bigger, like you aren't more open. Like I bumped into that when I was in the midst of purchasing my new car, like this feeling of my old car isn't totally dead yet, maybe I shouldn't be making this decision. And then I got to look at my level of havingness, and Jupiter's really good for that. He's really good at like pushing you into having more. And when we can have more, our system expands. And so it's a great thing to be kind of like asked to expand the vessel so that more can come in, right? On the shadow side of that, sometimes we get more of what we don't want, right? We just get an abundance of stuff, and we have to sort through what we need to keep and what needs to go. So that's Jupiter. And then Uranus is one of my favorite guys. In my chart, he happens to be conjunct Venus. And so I just have a love of Uranian energy. Uranus, of course, is the sky god, right, in mythology. And he marries Gaia, the earth god, and together they have their children. Um, However, archetypal astrologers tend to think that Uranus was named wrong, like that he should have had the name Prometheus because his energy is very liberatory in nature. We remember Prometheus was the god or the archetype in mythology who took the fire from the gods and gave it to the humans so that they wouldn't be enslaved anymore. And for his trouble, he got badly punished by Zeus for doing that. There is, of course, in the collective, we can feel it like this brimming and bubbling up of desire for liberation. You know, there's a whole liberation movement happening right now. And I think that does have a lot to do with Taurus. The Taurus Mystery School, Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus is about our values and our values as an individual. And what you hear in the thread of the kind of liberatory movement right now is this feeling of injustice in that like every human should have, right? And that's very Taurian in a sense. The other thing that Taurus, so if you work with me enough, you know that I kind of like have this idea of the progression of signs, right? So Pisces being the liminal realm, the kind of all, the abyss, the void, where everything originates from. It's the water we swim into this incarnation, and the water we swim out is created to, it is related to spirit. So when we're in the Piscean realm, we are in union with spirit. And once we get to that Aries, 0 point of Aries, that's the moment of separation. And Aries is ruled by Mars and the solar plexus in my cosmology, and in alchemy that is related to the function of separation. So that 0 point of Aries, the moment of separation, and we are embedded with our individual divine spark. So that's Aries, but that divine spark is just a spark. And then we move into Taurus, which is an earth sign ruled by Venus. It's highly related to the body. And if you think about um, Taurus being the bull, or the bull being carne, like carne asada, right? Taurus really has to do with this incarnation. And do we choose this incarnation, right? Do we really want to be here? What is it like to be a sensory percepting being, to have a somatic body, to Taurus wants to luxuriate. It wants to foster and facilitate life and accumulation and resources. It is a fixed sign, so it doesn't move quickly. It moves slowly. It's like that. It fosters the slow, sustainable type of growth in life. And so here we've got this blessing of abundant Jupiter, who is concerned with higher truths, philosophical truths, ethical truths, in a sign of values, right? Taurus. It's also a sign of resources and like the economy. So we've seen some interesting economic stuff as Uranus has moved through here. And Uranus is this sign of liberation and individuation and insights and earthquakes. Sudden irreconcilable changes happen. Uranus's aim and his relationship to Aquarius is in that, like, all of the sudden shifts that he precipitates, it is in service to humanity evolving and moving forward. And so it is one to watch. It is a transit to watch, because what we'll be doing is like dreaming into new solutions. Uranus's relationship to Aquarius and to the novel, into like, this isn't working anymore. I don't feel free. I feel stuck. I feel, especially like in a slow earth sign, like I feel inhibited. And so Uranus will want to break free, break through. And, like along the lines, potentially, when we've got Uranus, I think he's related to the nervous system personally, Aquarius, and being an air sign. And, he's also related to the internet. So we see Uranus working along channels, but there's this slow, fixed quality to Taurus. And so, what it's reminds me of is this idea of like these set in old neurological grooves, that we all kind of work along the same patterns, the same tired patterns, because the neuroplasticity hasn't come in to change things. And there's this great, Jupiter also has a connection to Pisces, in traditional astrology, he rules Pisces and Sagittarius. Um, in Pisces, there's that quality of dreaming and imagination, and we need that in order to create new things. In Sagittarius, I love that Sagittarius is ruled by the Temperance card, and in the imagery on the Temperance card, there is a figure, sometimes a man, sometimes a woman, but thought to be an alchemist or a magician, who is holding two chalices, one low and one high. So they're not even. And the water is flowing from the lower chalice into the higher chalice, signifying something that shouldn't be able to happen. It's got this quantum feel to it, this feel of like moving against gravity, that something might happen that was unexpected or that breaks universal laws, right? Um, but in service to evolution. That's the story with Uranus. And so as we are moving from this eclipse time, and all of the symbolism about eclipse, the eclipse, if you remember, was like it's an Aries, so there's newness, it's a solar eclipse. So again, second resonance for newness. It had that comet in the background, which is actually now going to be making a conjunction to the Jupiter Uranus eclipse, but it was in the background of the sky during the eclipse. That comet was called Pons Brooks. And we looked at the etymology of Pons. Pons meant bridge. And so, eclipses cause like wormholes. And so we see when there's several resonances that start to show up when we begin to weave the astrology together, we start to pay attention. So here we're having these like higher dreams, new possibilities, new visions, liberation, breakthrough, a bridge. So Aries is the new. So like, potentially a bridge into the future. And I always think of bridges as like you're going over something. It's like this opportunity to step from one place to another without having to go necessarily in through the muck. However, we're also in the midst still of Mercury retrograde. And that like talks to us of a redo. And so maybe the symbolism is that we're going to have a fruitful redo that won't require us to get as messy as we did the first time around. But the other dichotomy there is that Venus is hovering just above the underworld and we're about to go down, and that generally from at least from a mystery school perspective is kind of like light shattering. So the light body kind of shatters in a sense. And so again, the underworld itself is a kind of bridge. It bridges the descent to the ascent, but it is about going down. So at this moment, as we're sitting here with this really beautiful energy, Uranus, one of the things he can do is show us what we're in resistance to, because he has such a sudden a quality of like breakthrough, that kind of like earthquake energy. A lot of times what it does is show us like, oh, nope, I'm not breaking. Nothing's breaking through, nothing's breaking down, like where we are in resistance to change, shift, evolution, etc. The one nice thing I'm feeling for this time is that, we may not potentially know right away. And I kind of like that. Like with all of this new symbolism, it's so because Mars and Saturn and Neptune are all still in Pisces, and Mars is kind of the sign that helps us do. And then Mercury, mind, is moving backwards in retrograde. And so there's sort of this sense of like, we're incubating the newness, we're incubating the new ideas. Even if there is a radical shift or breakthrough that comes in with Uranus, it's like we don't quite know yet. We don't potentially have the conceptualized idea of what it's going to be until Mars moves into um, Mars moves into sorry, somebody sent me a message. Mars moves into Aries at the end of the month. And then once Mars moves into Aries, we'll get a bit of momentum potentially around the ideas. However, the sun by that time will have moved into Taurus. And Taurus, it's so funny, every single year, because I'm just somebody who moves with the energies because I'm so connected to them through the astrology, but also I live in a place where there's 4 seasons. So it's very complementary to astrology to actually have the external mirror back to you the the energy of the signs. And so I'll feel like a lot of momentum in um, Aries most of the time. Like you can start to feel the lift out of like the deep hibernation of winter. Um, but we'll have the sun when Mars moves into Aries, we'll have the sun going into Taurus. And then sometimes all of a sudden, I sort of feel drop down into like a dreamy, romantic slowness in Taurus. Taurus really is slow. So, why am I saying all this? Well, one, I think that that's really nice and supportive of some of the more or traditionally brusque kind of energies. Like eclipses can be like radical. And some people, like if you're having a nodal return right now, maybe you have had stuff that feels very jolting to the system. But if you aren't having like astrology that touches those eclipse points or the Uranus Jupiter conjunction, you may just sort of feel like more of a dreamy incubation. Definitely feeling sort of the upliftment or the sense that you're like floating in some kind of like new possibility, um, new potential. It'll help you to notice and observe where you're in resistance because it's not applying the same level of urgency. So this is a good thing to tune in with, like where am I in resistance here? Um, and then Venus right now is by Capricorn. And so whenever we get to tune in, or not Capricorn, Chiron, whenever we get to tune in to our levels of resistance and begin to tend to them and take them off, remove the resistance, generally a healing comes through, right? Venus being um, on the sign of Chiron isn't asking you to cure yourself, isn't asking you to do anything about it. She's simply asking you to meet what you find inside the vulnerability of that. And I'm just thrilled because the cohort I'm leading and the curriculum that we're doing is so well held by Venus's passage with Chiron now. She's going to get toned by Chiron, the wounded healer, the medicine man, the one who really helps us distill what our medicine is through working with our poison. So she's there now and she'll be there for a little bit. And then by the time she drops in the underworld at the end of this month, that chart with her finally 10 degrees away from the sun, she's conjunct Eris, Erishkigal, her dark sister, whom she meets in the underworld. And I just think the symbolism of that is epic because it gives us an Aries Erishkigal tone to our underworld journey. And Aries is all about, like we said, the divine spark. And so much of what we do in the underworld is in service to the revelation of that divine spark and allowing it to be revealed to us, the deepest sense of innocence within us. who we were before additions and subtractions, who we were before the conditioning of our family and the collective and society and community told us who we were. And then how we responded through creating these complex identity traps and masks that we put on. The underworld is in service to taking all of that off, being naked and bowed low before the mirror of who we are, Erishkigal, our quote unquote dark sister, who is on the floor giving birth. And so then we also get that birth motif in the underworld. And part of what we do in the underworld is allow ourselves to feel the essence of who we are so deeply that it gives birth to a brand new iteration of who we are. And often it reconnects us to our purpose in a more meaningful way and to our own creativity and what we came here to do, what our services on behalf of our soul, our incarnation, like that bowing down deeply to serve the life we incarnated to have, the gift that is mapped out for us on the astrology map. So it's such a deep journey, and the sort of dichotomy between having the Uranus evolution and Jupiter, new sweeping search of truth, higher truths, evolutionary truths, cosmic truths, having that conjunction in Taurus, Venus's sign. And then also having Venus then in courageous Aries. Like, you've got to be courageous to sign up for an underworld journey. You've got to be ready. You've got to be like on your knees for the thing and just have the courage to do it. I just couldn't be more thrilled at how supportive it all is, the astrology, for where we're going, spiritually, metaphorically, and honestly, even as a collective. Like, I know that we have been living through what on the out picturing looks like extraordinarily dark times. These have been dark times. This past year has been a great revelation, which you would have when you have Pluto in Aquarius. And Pluto's going to have something to do with our upcoming full moon, and full moons are all about illumination, Scorpio. It's been a great time of revelation of, there's been more of an unveiling, which is what apocalypse means. Like, the word apocalypse means to remove the veil. But I think what it has done is catalyzed so many of us to come together and to dream into, and even potentially get together and weave a new veil for the temple, right? Like there's a lot of symbolism and talk about the third temple. And I was in a conversation with my teacher not that long ago, and we were talking about, like, metaphorically, what do we think the third temple is, and how it's not really, I don't want to give any credence personally to that third temple being a physical manifestation, but like that the third temple is more like a sense of consciousness, a sense of bringing the sacred back to the profane, to instilling more eros on the planet, to the idea of virgin birth, which we'll talk about in Underworld, and the cult of priestesses who were involved in virgin birth, and how these 8 women wove the veil of the temple, and how there is potentially a movement towards deepening into that work and dreaming into that work. And like, this is definitely a time of destruction, and there is always destruction between ages. And everyone who incarnated now signed up to be on the transition team. If you're alive now, you signed up to come in to help us transition from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. So I want to really honor the both and. I deeply want to honor the pain and the just the nightmarish conditions that people in the Middle East are facing right now, all around. Um, and just how absolutely devastating it's been to witness that, to have family in the area, to be worried for them, to be thinking about um, seeing if we can get visas for some of them to come here. I mean, it's on a human level, it has been devastating. And there, we are these like dichotomous beings who are human and divine. And the divine part of me sort of sees the bigger plan, and it's not hope, but it's faith in these cycles. And that's so funny. My son's picture just fell. I always pay attention when something like that happens to what I'm saying. It's faith in these cycles. It's faith um, in the in the in the way that the cosmos has a pattern, has a specific design. And it's hard to talk about those things in the face of so much suffering, to say that there is mm, something potentially good that can come out of so much suffering can feel like a really insensitive thing to say. So please try and feel my heart, um, if this lands for you in a way that doesn't feel good, or don't make it something ugly. I'm trying to express something really beautiful. Like, how do we hold our brothers and sisters who are in pain, and how do we, in service to their suffering and what they have been through, how do we weave a tapestry of existence and consciousness that is more serving and supportive of all humanity in the future? So hope I said that well. Anyways, I think that's all. I like to take my notes, then I never end up looking at them until the very end so that I can make sure that I hit on everything. Yes, and I did. All right. I'll talk to you soon, loves. We stay tuned. We will have an opening call that I think you're gonna love for Underworld. Even if you don't join us, it'll be a great call. So you don't want to miss it. I'll send out an email and put some notifications up on social media. All right.